Why do intelligent, successful people still fall for manipulators? The answer will shock you if you're intelligent. Successful and self-aware, you probably think you're too smart to fall for manipulation. You analyze people carefully, you notice inconsistencies, you pride yourself on seeing through superficial charm. So why do some of the most accomplished, perceptive people find themselves completely blindsided by manipulators? The answer lies in understanding love bombing, a psychological warfare tactic that specifically targets your greatest strengths and turns them against you. Love bombing isn't just excessive attention or moving fast in a relationship. It's a calculated psychological assault designed to overwhelm your analytical defenses and create intense emotional dependency before you even realize what's happening. And here's the part that's going to shock you. The smarter and more emotionally intelligent you are, the more susceptible you become to sophisticated love bombing. Because manipulators adapt their tactics to match your psychological profile. Today, I'm going to break down the exact neurological and psychological mechanisms that make love bombing so devastatingly effective against high-functioning people. Show you how to recognize it even when it's disguised as genuine connection, and give you the tools to protect yourself without becoming cynical or closed off to authentic relationships. Let's start with what love bombing actually looks like when it's targeting someone with your psychological profile. Forget the stereotypical image of expensive gifts and over-the-top romantic gestures. When a manipulator targets an intelligent, analytical person, their love bombing is sophisticated, subtle, and custom-designed to feel like the authentic connection you've been searching for your entire life. They don't just compliment your appearance, they recognize and celebrate your intelligence in ways that feel incredibly rare and validating. They'll say things like, "I've never met anyone who thinks as deeply as you do," or "You see things that other people completely miss." For someone who's used to feeling misunderstood or intellectually isolated, this recognition feels like coming home. They mirror your values and interests with uncanny accuracy. But here's the key detail most people miss. They don't just agree with you, they enhance your ideas. You take your thoughts and build on them in ways that make you feel intellectually stimulated and understood. They become the perfect thinking partner you've always wanted, someone who not only gets your complexity, but matches it. They create intense emotional intimacy through vulnerability that feels authentic, but is actually strategic. They'll share carefully chosen personal struggles that parallel your own experiences, making you feel like you found someone who truly understands your inner world. But pay attention to this. Their vulnerabilities always paint them in ultimately favorable light, and they're shared at precisely the right moments to deepen your emotional investment. Here's where the neuroscience gets fascinating and terrifying. Your brain's reward system in ways that are particularly powerful for people with high emotional intelligence and analytical minds. When someone seems to understand and appreciate aspects of yourself that others miss, your brain releases massive amounts of dopamine, oxytocin, and norepinephrine, same neurochemical cocktail involved in addiction. But here's what makes this especially dangerous for intelligent people. Your analytical mind interprets this neurochemical high as confirmation that this person is uniquely compatible with you. You think you're making a rational assessment based on evidence, but you're actually making decisions under the influence of a chemical cocktail that's compromising your judgment. The love bomber understands that rushing into physical intimacy or making grand romantic gestures would trigger your analytical red flags. Instead, they create what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, periods of intense connection followed by subtle withdrawal, periods of deep understanding followed by moments where they seem slightly unreachable. This pattern is psychologically addictive because your brain starts craving the next hit of that perfect connection. They also exploit something called the scarcity principle in ways that feel natural rather than manipulative. They're incredibly busy with important work. They have a limited capacity for deep relationships. They've been hurt before and don't usually open up this quickly. Every piece of attention and vulnerability they give you feels precious and earned rather than freely given. Now let's talk about why high-functioning people are particularly vulnerable to these tactics. First, there's what I call the competence paradox. You're used to being good at things, used to figuring out complex problems, used to seeing through people's facades. This confidence in your abilities creates a blind spot. You assume that if someone were manipulating you, you'd notice. This assumption makes you less vigilant about subtle manipulation tactics. Second, High-functioning people often have what psychologists call imposter syndrome lurking beneath their competence. Despite your achievements, you sometimes feel like you're fooling everyone, like you're not as capable or deserving as people think. A love bomber who seems to see and appreciate your true worth touches this deep insecurity in ways that feel healing rather than exploitative. Third, intelligent analytical people often struggle with something called emotional loneliness. You can connect with people intellectually, you can be socially successful, but finding someone who truly understands your inner world feels rare. When someone appears to offer that deep emotional and intellectual connection, your guard drops because this is what you've been searching for. Fourth, high-functioning people are often used to earning love and admiration through performance, achievement, and being useful to others. When someone seems to love and appreciate you just for being yourself, without needing you to perform or achieve, it feels revolutionary. You don't realize that this apparent unconditional acceptance is actually conditional. It's based on your continued emotional availability and investment. Here's how sophisticated love bombers adapt their tactics specifically for analytical minds. They know you'll be suspicious of inconsistencies, so they maintain remarkable consistency in their persona, at least initially. They know you'll analyze their words carefully, so they speak in ways that sound emotionally intelligent and self-aware. They know you'll be looking for red flags, so they preemptively address potential concerns with reasonable explanations. They also understand that you probably research relationships, psychology, and human behavior, so they're familiar with the warning signs you've read about. They'll even acknowledge manipulative behaviors in others, positioning themselves as equally aware and equally committed to authentic connection. This creates a false sense of safety. Surely someone who's this aware of manipulation wouldn't be manipulative themselves. The most insidious part is how they exploit your empathy and analytical nature together. When small inconsistencies or concerning behaviors do surface, they provide complex psychological explanations that appeal to your desire to understand people deeply. They'll share trauma histories, family dynamics, or personal struggles that make their concerning behaviors seem understandable rather than manipulative. Your empathy makes you want to support them through their difficulties, and your analytical mind convinces you that understanding their psychology means you can handle the relationship safely. You become invested in their healing and growth, not realizing that this investment is exactly what they're designed to cultivate. Here's how to protect yourself without becoming cynical or closed off to genuine connection. First, implement what I call pacing audits. Healthy relationships develop organically over time with natural ebbs and flows. Love bombing creates artificial acceleration. Pay attention to the pace of emotional intimacy, vulnerability sharing, and future planning. If things feel too perfect too fast, that's your signal to slow down, regardless of how natural it feels in the moment. Second, practice external validation checks. When you're in the neurochemical haze of intense connection, your own judgment becomes unreliable. Share details about the relationship with trusted friends or family members who know you well. Not for their approval, but for their perspective on pacing, consistency, and any changes they notice in your behavior or emotional state. Third, maintain your independent identity in relationships even when the connection feels all-consuming. Love bombers want to become your primary source of emotional fulfillment as quickly as possible. Healthy partners encourage your other relationships and independent interests. If you find yourself gradually withdrawing from friends, hobbies, or activities that previously mattered to you, that's a warning sign, regardless of how natural that withdrawal feels. Fourth, pay attention to how they handle your boundaries, even small ones. Early in love bombing, they're usually excellent at respecting boundaries because they're still in the investment phase. But watch carefully for subtle testing. Do they push back when you're not immediately available? Do they make you feel guilty for needing space or time with others? Do they find ways around boundaries you've clearly stated? Fifth, implement future behavior prediction tests. Love bombers are excellent at talking about future values, tensions, and behaviors, but they're inconsistent at demonstrating them in small, everyday situations. Watch how they treat servers, how they handle minor frustrations, how they respond when they don't get what they want in low-stakes situations. These small behaviors are better predictors of future treatment than grand gestures or promises. Here's what might be the most important point. Trust your body's wisdom alongside your mind's analysis. Love bombing often creates a specific physical sensation, a kind of emotional high that feels intoxicating but slightly unnatural. Healthy connection feels warm and grounding. Love bombing feels exciting but destabilizing. Your nervous system knows the difference even when your mind is convinced everything is perfect. Document your emotional state and energy levels. Healthy relationships, even intense ones, leave you feeling more yourself. Love bombing relationships often leave you feeling slightly outside yourself, like you're living in a beautiful dream that's somehow disconnected from your normal reality. If you notice you're thinking about this person obsessively, if your other relationships and interests are fading into the background, if you feel like you're constantly on an emotional high or low, pay attention to these signals. Remember that recognizing love bombing isn't about becoming suspicious of genuine connection. It's about understanding that real love develops over time, includes imperfections and conflicts, allows for independent identity, and feels grounding rather than destabilizing. The person who's right for you won't need to overwhelm your defenses to win your heart. They'll earn your trust gradually through consistent, authentic behavior over time. Your intelligence and emotional depth aren't weaknesses that make you vulnerable to manipulation. They're strengths that, when properly informed, make you incredibly capable of building authentic, healthy relationships. The key is learning to use your analytical abilities and emotional intelligence together. Trusting both your mind's observations and your body's wisdom to guide you toward connections that honor your complexity without exploiting it.